Hey everybody, welcome to episode 10 of You've Probably Never Heard of Me, the podcast dedicated to shining a light on underground artists, creators, and changemakers that deserve your attention. I am your host, Ryan Allen. I'm a Detroit-based musician, and I spent over 2 decades playing in bands like Thunderbirds Are Now, Extra Arms, Big Life, Speed Circuit, and I've had the pleasure of meeting some really talented people that you might just not know about yet. So that's what I'm here to attempt to fix. And honestly, in full transparency, today's guest is maybe likely the most like heard of guest that I've had on the show yet. But while he's received accolades from the likes of Spin Magazine, Big Takeover, Pitchfork, and more, the name Mo Troper isn't maybe necessarily on the tip of the tongue of as many music fans as it should be. Um, Based in Portland, Mo is an incredibly talented singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist, one that has clearly studied the intricacies of the Beatles, the Beach Boys, Big Star, Teenage Fanclub, and more, that has been creating complex and evolving pop music publicly since the early 2010s. After playing in bands like Your Rival, TeenSpot, and Sancho, Mo put out his first solo album, which is called Beloved, in 2016. And since then, he's released 6 sort of official solo records, as well as some intriguing experiments, including front to back covers of records like the Beatles Revolver and a collection of unreleased songs by producer-songwriter Jon Brion called Troper Sings Brion. You add production work on records by Slippers, Bory, Diners, and more, and Mo's resume is just too impressive to remain obscure. So I'm really excited to dig into all of this stuff and more. Thank you so much for being on the show, Mo. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me and for the very kind introduction.
You're very welcome. You deserve all the kindness in the world. Um, Before we start, I sort of have like a little preamble here that comes with a bit of an admission. So I think I first heard your music in 2017. I think it's around the time that Exposure and Response came out by a friend of mine. His name's Nick Punty, who's a Detroit kind of like power
Yes.
pop guy that I've been
Yeah.
friends with for a while. Um, and honestly, like at first, it didn't really click with me, and I remember thinking like, this guy knows too many chords. Like it was a little too like perfect sounding, or maybe just to be honest, I think I was just jealous and secretly sort of thought you were better than me at songwriting, and I was just like, I can't listen to this. And it wasn't until you released Dilettante that I feel like I got sort of permanently sort of pulled into your universe. And I think my opinion sort of changed because it was a little more scrappy fidelity wise. I could hear like your sense of humor coming through in the songs, and just there was like an overall sort of subversiveness to things that seemed to fly in the face of the more maybe like traditional sounding pop rock records that you were making kind of in your early days, which, by the way, I've gone back and listened to, and I think they're all like super fantastic. So, don't get me wrong. I think all of the early stuff is great, but um, it kind of reminds me of the move that like Guided by Voices made, like where they made some more like traditional sounding pop records. And then, along comes B1000 and Alien Lanes. And, the fidelity of those records are, it's more challenging to get into. Um,
Sure.
but I feel like um on Dilettante, like I could really hear you transition into like I don't give a fuck kind of era of your
Yeah, totally.
songwriting and album
Sure.
making. And I guess I know that was kind of like a long-winded setup, but what I'm wondering is, where did that kind of come from in terms of like that subversiveness and that sort of like maybe pivot from some of those maybe cleaner sounding earlier records to, those kind of more lower fidelity but still like very catchy songs. And what I'm really wondering is like, have you always kind of had that as part of your personality, even like growing up, being more subversive or kind of like borderline contrarian, even as like a young kid? Like, is that something that's always been part of you? Is that something that's conscious that you're like aware of, or is it something where it just was the right move to make at the right time?
Sure. Those are all really good questions.
Yeah.
I well, so yeah, I mean, like personally, when I listen to the older kind of pre-dilettante records. Um, not that I'm like crazy about listening to my own work, but when I
Sure.
go back and when I do revisit those records, there is sort of like a stuffiness or a perfumedness
Mhm.
um, about them. They feel a little like I feel sort of disconnected from them.
Okay.
They seem very sort of self-serious, and so I think that you clocked it really accurately. I
Mhm.
think that Dilettante is like the first record I made where my personality and the music I make felt like they were more in alignment. And I think that with that
Okay.
record in particular, like I just think that there were uh like I don't want to say like self-censorship necessarily, but
Mhm.
there was a lot of like conscious like sanitization. Like when I think about exposure and response, it's a very like stuffy sounding record. It takes itself really seriously. Natural Beauty to me is like very clean.
Mhm.
It sounds very like robotic. And I think with Dilettante, it was just, I think some of that came from like the isolation of the pandemic and
Yeah.
sort of
Okay.
really like meditating on that. And um I really wanted to, like, I made Natural Beauty and had a lot of sort of high hopes for that record,
Mhm.
and they sort of were all demolished because that record came out Valentine's Day 2020.
Right.
So it
Right.
was
Right.
like, you know, all the, like, it just sort of killed the record and killed the tour that was going to accompany the record. And
Right.
it was kind of like, okay, well, what do you do now? Like, do you make like another clean record and
Mhm.
wait until the pandemic is over or something? But I think that I just sort of felt more. Um, I mean, I have always had a contrarian streak, and I
Okay.
think that I felt more like kind of like deconstructionist, sort of, where there were things about power pop that started to feel like increasingly corny to
Mhm.
me,
Right.
and I felt sort of like stuck in a corny idiom, and I was like, I want to do everything I can to sort of like break out of this, or at least sort of like um, communicate to the world that I'm like self-aware, you
Mhm.
know.
This is
Um,
why I was so
s-
excited to talk to you, honestly, because I feel like you and I come at some of this stuff from a very similar place. Not to make this about me or
sure,
anything, but like I can relate to what you're saying about the pandemic and it sort of being like the wind out of your sails, aside from like the terribleness of just people getting sick and dying, right? Like the you know kind of like the affording creatives like yourself and me this like time to kind of explore, like what else can we do or like self-analyze. Like I had a very similar experience where we made it a record with Extra Arms. It was going to come out. It did come out. And then 2, 3 months later, we were all stuck in our houses and I was going in the basement, like
sure,
trying to teach myself how to record and making sort of these like blown out lo-fi shitty sounding, not on purpose, but just like I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And just like the
sure,
songs were coming, and it just was this like, okay, well, I could maybe get sick and die tomorrow. So I just need to capture whatever I'm doing and not worry about the fidelity and just get it down because everything felt so unpredictable at that moment. So
sure.
it's cool to kind of hear you say that because I feel like, a lot of people experience that are sort of creatives like us. But back to kind of what you were saying, like that kind of contrarian nature, that subversive nature, like is that something that you feel like has been a part of your personality since you were a young kid growing up?
I think so. Like I would get in trouble a lot at school and
Okay.
stuff, and like I in the it's actually the liner notes for Beloved. There's like a referral. Like one side of it is the lyrics, and then the other side of the insert is a referral that I got in middle school, where that mentions how I had to be, like, dragged out of the classroom for singing show tunes or something. So yeah, I mean, I think that like I've always like had like I've always liked to. I've never liked cruelty or punching down or any kind of like
Yeah.
malignant form of subversion, but I think like challenging authority or challenging certain like social mores. Like it's funny when I think about the things I got in trouble for. It's like, being kicked out of class and sent to the principal's for singing show tunes. It's like when
Yeah.
you say that out loud, you're like, why would I get in trouble for that? That's like so benign. So
Right.
I think that I really zeroed in on like what made adults irritated when I was younger, and I think I got a lot of satisfaction out of like exploiting that. And so I think that that has sort of that is like a through line kind of, and I think that it's like gotten me in trouble on the internet
Mhm.
multiple
Well, and
times
then
over
you
the
fast
years.
forward, right? Like you fast forward, to now, or like maybe post dilettante at least, and you kind of accumulate these like trad power pop fans, right? Who like appreciate
Yes,
the
yeah,
the sort of like cleanliness of some of those recordings, which I still think the subversion and like the humor and some of that, like it's in those records too, like it's just maybe there maybe isn't like a song about, going to like a hentai convention or whatever, right? Like
sure, yeah, yeah,
you
sure,
know but I think you can still, you can sort of push those same buttons with the like, you know traditional power pop fan who like wants their, power pop to be like she loves you, yeah, 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 and that's it, right? Like they want it to
sure,
be
yeah,
like Beatles, 64 to 66 or whatever that like,
sure,
pre Revolver, kind of era is, and that's they all the bands that they sort of gravitate to or artists they gravitate to kind of fit inside that like pocket, right? Whereas for
right,
you, and I think for myself too, pushing boundaries and just like, not staying like stuck in that box, so to speak, is like part of what we do, and sometimes that
sure,
ruffles people's feathers who want it one specific way. um
right,
well, what I want to kind of ask you next is more about your childhood a little bit, just like how you sort of first got interested in music. You're already mentioning like singing show tunes and stuff, so I assume like that was part of your like musical, the fabric that made you you, as a young person. But when did you go from being like a fan, and like consuming music to actually like writing and performing and playing in bands and making records eventually? Like what sort of first got you interested and inspired to do that?
sure. Well, my dad was and is a big collector, and he had a ton of records. When
Hmm.
I like he was like a hardcore Beatles fan who collected like records in addition to like Beatles paraphernalia. So there were
Oh,
like
okay.
Beatles bobbleheads and like all that type of shit
Right,
in
right.
the houses I lived in when I grew up. So that was my introduction to music. And then
Not a bad
um
introduction.
not a bad introduction. And I was
No.
just like obsessed with so much classic pop music, like, you
Hmm.
know, the Hollies and like the Beach Boys and a bunch of stuff just
Okay.
because it was always, my dad always had stuff like playing on the TV, but it was always like old, weird shows like Ready, Steady, Go, or like the Old Gray Whistle Test, like stuff that
Right.
he had taped kind of, or
Hmm.
he went to like weird, like VHS swap meets and obtained these tapes
Right.
of like all these TV shows. So that was like, so there was a big visual component I was hooked on with the videos. And then I got older, and um, a lot of like uh, found out about a lot. Like, so my mom and dad separated when I was pretty young. So
Hmm.
for a long time, I didn't really like have any kind of direct link to music. I kind of had to like rediscover things on my own. And a
Hmm.
lot of it was through like message board culture.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
like, I don't know if you remember when iTunes had like they had like a inspired by and
Hmm.
inspired tab,
Hmm.
like when you
Hmm.
were looking at an artist bio. So that was like huge for me because I would, be really like fixated, like, jellyfish was like huge for me.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
found out about Jellyfish when I was in like 8th grade, and then I remember going to that section of their iTunes bio and seeing like influenced by Big Star,
Right.
and then I would like go to be like, well, who the fuck is Big Star? And
Right.
then I would sort of find out about a lot of that stuff naturally, and it all sort of like uh, coincided with like I think about 8th grade is like I'm pretty sure that was when YouTube launched,
Okay.
so it was like suddenly like I did a lot of like MediaFire stuff, like in Google, just like MediaFire, name of album, downloaded the album. Um, but a lot of stuff was like on YouTube, like a lot
Hmm.
of there was jellyfish videos being uploaded to YouTube like 17
Hmm.
years ago or whatever. So
Right.
um, so that's how I like reconnected with music, and then I got really involved in Portland's DIY scene and got really interested in the music that was being made here locally,
Yeah.
and I think wanted to participate in that because up until that point music had been like very solitary for me. So
Hmm.
to suddenly like the realization that like it's not just like uh Portland is like not like might be similar to Detroit in the sense that it's like a city, but it's not like New York or
Sure.
something. And
It's
so
like
it's
a
not
big
like
small
it's
town,
not
right?
it's a big small town. And so
Yeah.
like the local music scene isn't like because it's not like this quote unquote like bastion of civilization, even though Detroit definitely is more so than Portland, or
Yeah.
has historically been
Can feel that way.
connected, but I just think it's not like immediately clear. It in a smaller city, I think you have to sort of seek out the local music scene, and like that to me was like I was like, oh, there's music here beyond like fucking Wolf Mother playing
Right.
like in big venue or whatever. Like there are actually like rock bands that are houses, and that to me was like revelatory. And
Yeah.
and then
And
I just
Portland has, an
I
amazing scene,
yeah
right? Like amazing history from, the Wipers through,
sure
like some of the like K Records kind of adjacent stuff, and
sure
obviously that's like
yeah
Olympia, but like similar kind of like uh part of the country um and I was wanting to ask you about those kind
sure
of early bands. I already mentioned them, but you were in three bands that I can kind of like stumble upon sort of between like 2013, 2015. It seems like that's when those like releases at least came out. So you were in Your Rival, TeenSpot, Sancho, and I feel like you were the songwriter in most of those projects from what I could sort of like pick up on, kind of just like going
yeah
back and listening to some of that stuff. And what I'm really curious about, I mean, I think you were sort of alluding to this like idea of like there's the DIY scene happening, and Portland feels like this big small town. And I'm sure like if you played drums, you were in three bands, right? Because there wasn't
exactly yeah
7,000 drummers in
exactly
Portland. So um but what I'm curious about with those early projects, like when you think back on those early days of like, getting involved in the scene, like what does that feeling kind of conjure for you? Do you kind of cringe when you listen to, or you happen to hear some of that stuff or think about that stuff? Do you feel pride? Do you hear, yourself kind of figuring things out? Like, do you hear the lineage to what you do now? Like, I'm just really curious about
sure
those early days of Mo Troper's kind of like musical evolution.
sure well I wouldn't say I feel pride. There's some stuff that I feel better about, like so I should clarify that Teen Spot and Sancho were very collaborative
Okay.
projects. Your Rival was essentially a solo project, um,
Okay.
and I it was like it started in high school, and I basically just decided with Beloved like I just didn't want to be associated with my high school band name anymore,
Sure, sure,
which I think is
sure.
like a common experience. With
Mhm,
that stuff, I definitely cringe quite a bit. Um, but some of it I think is okay, and it conjures like I think less about the music
mhm.
than like just the I mean, this is so cliche, but just the community
Right.
element
The
of, because
spirit
it's like
of
an
kind of doing shit for with your
DIY.
friends and yeah,
Sure.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, I like volunteered at a bunch of venues, and well, no, I wouldn't shouldn't say a bunch of venues, but I volunteered at like Laughing Horse Books, and there was a lot of kind of like Portland, Seattle, Olympia, like interchange then, which I
Mhm.
feel like there's less of that now. I'm also less conscious of what's going on because I'm fucking old as shit. But then
Not as
then
old as
it
I am. Don't you worry.
but then it um was just like, think about all the like mixed bills I played on, and I played with like
Mhm.
screamo bands and
Yeah, totally.
like
That's
weird math
that's like
rock
the best
bands.
part about that kind of like those early days of figuring it out, especially if you're, able to like connect to a DIY scene, I feel like, where you
Sure,
are going to be exposed to so many things that like otherwise you might not be. Like if you're like on message boards and YouTube watching jellyfish videos, you're probably not also like, throwing on like a Locust album or something like a San Diego
sure.
like
But my
screamo
friends
hardcore
were,
band.
and
But
that's the thing
exactly,
that
and
was
then it's like let's just
crazy.
fucking
Yeah,
play a show, and it
yeah.
doesn't
No,
matter
totally.
who you're influenced by or like I have so many good memories of like that kind of time in my life too, where it's just like this hodgepodge of sounds and people and styles and whatever, and I feel
Sure.
like I feel bad for people that don't experience that kind of thing because I feel like it can like really inform your kind of like how you live the rest of your life, honestly. You're from your
Yeah,
politics to, the choices you make. And I just feel like it's such a special thing. So, and I feel like there's maybe this like, not to like get on a soapbox about this, but I do feel like there's kind of two sides. Like there's the people who lives and experience the DIY, kind of like community and scene or whatever that maybe did go on to do what you did, which was write more kind of sophisticated music. But you never lose that person who's like experienced that DIY culture and that DIY experience. Whereas like if you
sure,
haven't done that, like if you haven't had your toes dipped in punk in some way, shape, or form,
sure,
you don't have a point of reference for danger in implementing that into your music. And so I,
sure.
I
Yeah,
feel like I hear that even in what you're doing now, which is kind of gone back to, that kind of like sophisticated arrangements and things like that, which I absolutely love. But I still hear the punk in you, even not knowing that all of that background until you just told me it, if that makes sense to you.
sure. That's yeah. No, I mean, I think what you're describing is totally what I experienced, where it was like I didn't. I mean, some of my favorite bands when I was a kid were like emo bands, and I
Mhm.
just never really considered, like, it's kind of like um it's like being a baby or something. It's like it's like you're not conscious of um you're just not really conscious of like these I don't know what to
Well, the
like
social constructs of the
boundaries, I
scene,
think.
yeah, it totally.
Yeah, sure. So I think it was just like, you know, I want to go see some people like play guitar. I want to go see
Yeah,
something that's like really loud. And
yeah,
that's kind
it's
of
that
like
simple.
that scratches the itch. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I wasn't, as much as I loved Jellyfish, I was not like, I need to find some local bands that sound like Jellyfish
yeah. I need a
now,
big
which I
floppy
think like,
hat and like some
yeah, some
some
Beetlejuice pants and
exactly.
uh uh bubble machines and
I need a fucking drummer who plays standing up and sings at the same
yeah,
time. Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
And Portland in general, I think, was very like, it's funny because like I'll even like, I remember when Blue came to Portland and we recorded Domino, the Diners record thing. and it was then from Bory, Blue and I were like the band on that record, and Blue was
Mhm.
like, "Do you guys always practice like so fucking loud?" And it was kind of this like I've had this experience before where like I'll go to other places on the West Coast, pretty much south of Portland, and people are always like, "Yeah, there's something like kind of like grungy about like
Mhm.
bands from the Pacific Northwest." And so I do think that like Portland is um it's like a loud rock town kind of,
It
which
always has
Detroit, I
been.
mean, also is, yeah, it's a similar. Think about like the MC5,
Yeah, I mean,
the stories about
I
the
can't not play
MC5.
loud.
Yeah, sure. I know, me neither. I can't play loud at all. Um, Always hated Fender amps for that reason. I
Um,
want those mids, you know?
yeah, right on. Well, so let's dig in just a little bit more because there obvious as we're sort of talking here about your early days. You already mentioned this, but your first solo record that is under the name of Mo Troper, Beloved. That's like a 2016 record, but that
Yeah,
comes out of your Arrival, which is the sort of like previous solo moniker, high school band, sort of
sure,
thing. Um, so and you put out Gold as well, kind of like pretty quickly after that. And kind of basically what we're talking about right now, like both of those records have sort of like a loud guitar, drum, crunchy, catchy, like Weezery, super drag kind of vibe to
sure,
them. And exposure and response, kind of comes along, right? And shaves a little bit of that noise and edge off, kind of in favor of something more a little bit elaborate, intricate. I mean, there's horns, there's strings, but it's still in like a rock, context. So I'm curious, like, how did your like tastes evolve in that like super short period? Because it had to either
yeah,
be you reaching back maybe to some of the like Beatles, Jellyfish, big starry influence that you were kind of mentioning that you stumbled upon in like eighth grade. But I feel like there's got to be more to it than that, where you sort of make a little bit of a jump between that Weezer kind of crunchy sound to, again, something a little bit more ornate. And I'm curious about your listening habits and what you're listening to at the time, and if you were like in this big like phase of discovery that kind of led you into that sort of second phase, I guess, of your solo career, if you want to
sure.
call it that.
Uh, yeah, well, there are some really specific uh, touchstones, I should say, where and there are specific circumstances. I moved to LA from Portland and lived there for about a year,
Mhm.
and didn't really leave my apartment. And LA is like a weird city to live in when you're not leaving your apartment. You may as well live like on the moon. Like it
Right,
doesn't
for
feel like
sure.
you're anywhere. But so, but in that period of time, I did see Jon Brion twice at the
Mhm.
Largo, and I was already familiar with Jon Brion, but I think seeing it was really revelatory. And I think I just like I had made like, even though Beloved was like the first solo record I made, it was like I had made kind of like three really loud rock records before that. And so
Mhm.
I was kind of tired of doing that. And what I want to emphasize really is that I heard the Diners record 3, which is
Okay.
I which is on Asian Man, and it was like a punk record. Like Blue is very much involved in the DIY scene.
Mhm.
She was living in Arizona at the time, and it was really soft sounding to me.
Mhm.
And I think I was sort of like what you're describing, or sort of like what you were describing a little bit ago. Like I was able to identify like the punk spirit of this record that was very kind of delicate sounding,
Well,
and
how
there was
punk is
like,
it to make a delicate sounding record, right? Like,
sure,
exactly,
totally. I listened to, I just remember like listening to it in headphones, and just like, so okay, so actually two records. There's 3 by Diners, and then The Party by Andy Schaaf. Both came out, I think,
Okay.
right at the same
Yep.
time. And those records both have kind of a similar like drums that sound like pillows, like just
Hmm.
kind of a similar sonic aesthetic, and they both like kind of feel more like Harry Nielsen or something.
Hmm.
But I think the Diners record in particular was like really big for me because it was like, oh, this is like there's like an audience for this. Like there are people in DIY who respond to like music that sounds like solo Paul McCartney kind of.
Hmm.
And it
Totally.
really kind of like inspired me to want to do something more orchestral and less loud. I was really
Hmm.
influenced by those two records and
Okay.
wanted to
Yeah.
like and like and like yeah.
I was gonna say, I just
Um
heard today, actually, my brother sent me um a song by Tobias Jesso Jr. I don't know if you're
sure,
familiar, but
that
like
same year.
that
I
sort
think
of
that
like
that
drops
record came
right
out the same
into what
year.
2015, right?
I
Maybe
think
maybe
2015 or
2017.
2016.
Yeah, something like that. But
Okay.
like yeah,
Yeah.
which I wasn't super familiar with and didn't realize that he had like written songs for like pop artists. I think he wrote some like Adele songs or
Right.
something, but like
Yeah.
that's another example of a record from that kind of similar era that does what you're describing, which is like referencing, McCartney's early solo career and like Emmett Rhodes and stuff like that, where it's like
Emmett
less in your
Rhodes,
face.
definitely.
Which, as an aside, my son's name is Emmett, and it's spelled the same way as Emmett Rhodes on purpose.
That's
So,
awesome. I love that. I
yeah,
love
he
that.
doesn't like music, really. He's into basketball, but I know that that's where it comes from, and so he's got to deal with it, I guess. But
Sure.
anyway,
That's
back to what you're
great.
saying. No, I feel like I kind of heard that in it before you said it, but like it's always good to kind of get just to talk to people kind of about that, because when you do make a pivot, when you do like stumble upon or get drawn in to things that could be new influences on you, whether they're new or they're old or whatever and just new to you. I am constantly having that experience, and
Sure.
and sometimes I feel like, am I the only one that which is of course not the case at all. But I feel like I don't have conversations with people that experience that. And I think it's so interesting to hear from like the songwriter, like what were those records that kind of like hit you right here that made you go, I don't want to rip this off necessarily, but the spirit of what this is, it's
Yeah.
so intoxicating to me that I need to figure out a way to like sew this into what I'm already doing. And that's how I think a lot of music, including yours, ends up becoming and being unique, right? Because it's always going to be you, no matter where you are in the timeline of your influences and what you're hearing. Because obviously, music discovery is an endless thing, right? Like,
Sure.
I mean, I just got super into Afrobeat last year, like this
Okay. Sure.
genre of music that's existed for, you know, 35 years. Like I'm just
Sure.
finding out about, not finding out, but just like really digging into it now. And but that's what's so cool about music, right? So anyways, no, it's very
Yeah.
like interesting to hear you talk about that. So like I do want to talk about natural beauty because I feel like
Sure.
exposure and response like feels like the bridge between those first couple records and what sort of ends up happening on natural beauty. And it also kind of I feel like is maybe the first record that you put out that sort of did grab some attention, sort of maybe a little bit beyond, kind of that Pacific Northwest scene or maybe the LA kind of like singer-songwriter thing that like, kind of revolved around Brian's like residency and whatever. Um,
Sure.
and that kind of record sort of continues down that path of, like tight, really well executed pop songs. But it also shows off your chops, I think, like from a producer perspective.
Sure.
There's some really nice ear candy, additional instrumentation. So, what I'm kind of curious about is like when you look back on that record and you like kind of consider your career and what you've made, do you kind of see that as like a turning point record for you? And I'm just kind of curious, like what role you think that record kind of plays in your overall catalog. I know you kind of had some like maybe disparaging things ish to say about it
Sure.
at the top here, but I do think it's a great record. Um,
Thanks.
and I'm just kind of curious, like what you kind of considered as considering the sort of reactionary shit that comes afterwards.
Sure. I personally hate that record.
Okay, okay. You're gonna really bum
I
out Nick Pianti.
okay. I think it really yeah, I think it appealed to I think that I had a band, I had a backing band that was semi-permanent
Right.
for Beloved and Exposure and Response, and
I think
I
I
kind
watched
of
some
wanted
YouTube performances of
yeah.
that version of the band maybe a few years
Okay,
ago.
yeah. And I basically wanted to do something entirely on my own,
Hmm.
and so that was Natural Beauty, and it's not entirely on my own, but it's like the parts were arranged by me, and I played a lot of the piano and the bass. It was
Hmm.
like the first record where I played like piano, bass, guitar. Like there wasn't like a like I do think that I, as a pianist and as a bassist, I think that I improved quite a bit
You played
on
bass when
that
we
on that.
played with you, actually, live.
I did, yeah, and
You played
I
that
love
Rick
that
bass.
lineup. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah, that was,
Greco, yeah,
oh yeah, yeah, that's
um,
it. Yeah, the sort of copy of
and
it. Yeah.
yeah, and so I guess I don't have too much to say about it other than the songs to me just sound like a little contrived. And
Hmm.
I think that there was no real like heft. There's no real like emotional heft there in the same way that there's no like uh thesis, I think, which
Right.
I
Yeah.
think for me is really important
Right.
as
There's
like
no
both a
manifesto
listener.
aspect to it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why I can't really say anything about it, I think.
Well, I think
Um,
it's actually cool to hear you kind of like um kind of depict it, in that way because again, like I think my kind of approach to these conversations is to find the common ground between this because I'm talking to creatives, right? And I guess I'm one
sure.
too. But like I have a record in my catalog. I used to be in this band called Thunderbirds Are Now. And we were,
Yeah,
doing the thing kind of indie blog era or whatever. We were on like a pretty cool label and we got to tour and whatever. And um, but it was all super unexpected. Like it was never anything that I would have actually thought could happen, like started to happen. But along with all of the good there is like, you know, it becomes harder to do things like write songs that you can spend time on because you're like going here, you're going there, it's not like we were on, playing on Conan or anything, but like, we were on the road a lot and just like trying to like squeeze every ounce that we could out of this unexpected thing that happened. But anyway, we made a record that I don't think it's awful by any means, but it's the last Thunderbirds record. It's called Make History. And it was rushed and it was not road tested very, like at the time
yeah,
that was
sure.
kind of like we were like a live band and we were, you know, uh didn't get a chance to let the songs grow and evolve before we went and recorded them. And I listen to that record, I'll hear something from it or I'll think about it even from time to time and I do feel this like I let down, like I wish that I did things differently. Like I have regrets about that record. But the good thing about
Sure.
that record and the reason why, even though it may not be my favorite thing that I've ever done, I'm so glad it exists because it helped me figure out everything I wanted to do afterwards. Like I needed
Sure,
to make
totally.
that record and do it in the way that it happened and even experience some of the like come down from like where we were sort of at. Like that record was the beginning of the end for that band. And
Sure.
while that was like hard to deal with as like a 26-year-old person, 27 or whatever I was at the time, I'm so glad it went the way it went in retrospect because it gave me it. I was like, okay, I know what it feels like now to make something that I'm not super proud of and I
Yeah,
never want to feel this way ever again. And it doesn't matter if what
sure.
I put out is like of the highest quality recording wise. Like none of that shit matters to me. What matters is if I feel like I can back it and stand behind it. And I don't know
Sure.
if I would have that approach if I didn't experience what I experienced with that record. So
Sure.
I don't know if that like hits home for you at all, but like that's just how it sort of
Sure.
kind of like manifested for me. And I do think it's actually like a good segue because again, we talked a bit about Dilettante or a little bit already, but you know, you've got that record, you've got MTV and eventually Svengali. So MTV comes out in 2022 after you make Dilettante, which is like more of a lo-fi kind of like fuzzed out, blown out vocal thing. And you know,
Yeah.
MTV and even Svengali kind of carries that through in their own ways. But you know, I mean, I don't think it's like gonna blow your mind that I observe this as a reaction to Natural Beauty. Um,
Sure.
and so I'm kind of curious, you know, was there an attempt to kind of like, you know, murder that record, so to speak, by doing that those kind of succession of records with the fuzz and the imperfectness and the ugly chords and the short songs? Like
Yeah.
walk me kind of through that past the like COVID stuff, which seems like maybe part of the story, but not all of the story. Like walk me through kind of your
Sure.
mindset at the time and if what I'm saying resonates with you at all.
Sure. Dilettante was definitely an attempt to murder Natural Beauty.
Okay.
Um, and it was an attempt to synthesize, I think, a lot of like it it was sort of like um yeah, in my mind it was just like sort of going in the complete opposite direction. Like in a sense, it was in the sense that I played everything on Dilettante. It was
Hmm.
similar to Natural Beauty. So it's like personnel wise, it was really similar. But I think philosophically and musically, it was like just like do the song, do what comes naturally, which to me
Hmm.
in most instances is like a dimed electric guitar, and
Yeah.
just like don't and like my north stars, I guess, for that record were like um something like the White Album, or
Hmm.
something where it's like sort of like impossible to tell how serious any of it is. And like I would write stuff that I thought was just so stupid, and I was like, well, this is fun, and this is like a funny thing that I'd have never put on a record, sort of when I was in the Natural Beauty headspace. um MTV was like, so the thing about MTV was there were a couple things that happened. So I got signed to Lamo after I put
Hmm.
out Dilettante, and Lamo basically was like, "Yeah, talk to us when you want to put out your next record, like whenever that will be." And I lied to them and told them that I had already made a record, which is not true. And I don't think I had even written any songs yet.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, I had struck up a friendship with Tony Molina, who was
Oh, cool.
like telling me that I had to record with tape. So he was like, "You have to get an 8 track or a 4 track. You have to make a record with tape, because that's like what all the greats do, or whatever." That's obviously what Tony does.
Yeah, yeah, and
So
those records sound rad and like
yeah,
he's a great
and
songwriter. Yeah, that's cool.
so I was really inspired. So this really great music shop in Portland called Hank's Music Exchange. Hank happened to be selling 2 8 tracks, and so I got one and like read the literature, the technical literature online, and taught myself how to ping pong, and
Hmm.
basically was like, I'm just gonna make a, I told Lamo that I had a record, which is not true. But I now I have an 8 track, and I'm gonna just make this record really quickly. And I think that record, like from conception to the mastering stage, I think it was all written and recorded from like January to March, I want to
Yeah,
say. And
and
when I had
I love
some of
that.
those songs, yeah, when I had some of those songs and I shared them with people close to me, I think that there were some reservations that people like. Some people thought it was like too too rough. I remember somebody was like, "This makes Dilettante sound like top 40." Is what somebody
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
Um, and it was like, but it was a very it was like that record is kind of like a manic sprint just through a bunch of different like
Yeah.
emotional
I don't
states
know
that
if
I
you
was
can like see
experiencing
me
really
smiling
intensely.
and sort of laughing and grinning, but like the reason I am
Like,
is because like A, you're like really kind of like connecting to something that like I feel is so important about this kind of like maybe unspoken conversation that we are and aren't having at the same time, which is that power pop music is fucking so precious and it's got all these stupid rules. And I feel like every genre has it, right? But like
sure,
there's something about power pop that is like extra annoying. And so when you can
yes,
do something that, it's it's not like you fucking are gonna make like some industrial record, although there's like weird shit like that like happening on both
yeah,
MTV and Svengali, but like it's still Mo Troper, but like it's 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 you're just stepping into sort of this other frame of mind that is like more about like first idea, best idea, and capturing the spirit of the
sure,
thing at the moment and not being so fucking concerned about the it sounding perfect. And I think like power pop is
yeah,
this kind of like sort of expectation that in order to be power pop, it has to have this perfection aspect to it. And I just don't fucking buy into that,
yes,
right? And so I love that you made these records that is such a fuck you, not only to maybe your past self a little bit and what you made prior to it, but it's also kind of a fuck you to this idea that it has to be that way. And maybe I'm like,
right, yeah,
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like, and if it's not that, it's not that. But like, what it means to me as a listener and as a fan, it's part of that. And I think the reason I love those records so much is not only because the songs are cool and it sounds cool, but I feel like I get the spirit behind it as well. And that draws me in as somebody who also is like drawn into punk and punk like ethics and aesthetic in
sure.
general. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I think that you're not putting words in my mouth. I think that there was
Okay.
a concerted effort to do something deconstructionist
Hmm.
with MTV, and I think that I mean again, sort of like we were talking about just being like a contrarian or whatever. The
Hmm.
idea that I had a label lined up with a distributor, with a publicist, and I made sort of the shittiest record, to me
Yeah.
was really amusing. It was never the record that I expected to take off in any sense.
Yeah.
And I, so there was some of,
But dude,
yeah, it
it
was
worked. It totally worked
it,
because those are the
somehow,
records
yeah,
that got me to go, okay, now I understand what this is. And
sure,
it
that's
and it
awesome.
gave me a new appreciation for your older records too that I kind of like I said, is sort of initially brushed off because I
Sure.
think I was kind of suspicious of how, again, I don't use the word perfect or whatever, or clean, or I mean, there's all these like
That's
easy to
fine. You can
to
call it
pull
whatever you want.
descriptions, but you know what I mean? Like I feel like there's that is what got me to go, no, like this dude is doing something here. Like I get what he's doing, and I think it's like not gonna not be for everybody, and that's why
Sure.
it's for me because I heard the sort of like subversiveness in it sewn right into the like still very like well-written pop songs. So nicely
That's
done,
awesome.
I will
Thank you.
say. And I feel like
Thank you.
Svengali,
Yeah.
honestly, Svengali really kind of like takes that to the fucking max level, not only from like the original album cover perspective, which is absolutely
Yes.
insane, but also just like the suite of just like weird sound, the Svengali suite kind of like section of the
Yeah.
record. It's
Yes.
just like
Yeah.
it's sort of just like, okay, if you can fucking get through this shit and like hang on for the last couple tunes, like congratulations, and
Sure.
again, like when
Yeah.
I heard that, I was just like, this motherfucker is doing this, and I loved that
Yeah.
about it. So, not that you're a motherfucker.
Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't mean to insult you.
No, it's
But
fine.
you get where I'm
I'm
coming from.
insulted.
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I kind of interrupted you, but something I kind of in the sense of what we're talking about, I want to talk to you about humor and sort of injecting humor into your music.
Sure.
Almost in this kind of like, again, we're sort of already talking about this, but in this sort of antagonistic kind of style.
Sure.
Um, you know, and like songs like with like some funny titles like "Come on My Khakis"
Of
is
course.
one. Skyscraper sized bong might be another. Wet t-shirt contest. Also, I'm going to add to the list of ridiculous song titles that I appreciate. Even Billy Joel Fan Club is hilarious. Um, so we already talked about the album cover and Svengali's theme, which is its own journey. Um, but again, like, do you feel like that's the doing these types of things is intentionally, almost in a way, like separating you from the sort of more safe, quote unquote, like power pop artists out there? Like, is there like an intentionality to kind of draw a line and say, like, I do like some of this shit over here, but I'm on this other side. I don't
Yeah,
again
I
put
think
ideas or words in your mouth, but
no,
that's
it's
my take on it.
so I will say that like my favorite songwriters are not like Eric Carmen from the Raspberries
Hmm.
or like these, like Paul Collins. Like
Right.
I'm drawn to I think that I make power pop music sort of organically because that was what I was so obsessed with growing up, and that's sort of like yoked to this um loud guitar thing at some point that was also just very organic to me
Hmm.
when I was growing up in Portland and
Right.
playing with a bunch of really loud bands. I think that my favorite songwriters are like Randy Newman.
Hmm.
Um, like I'm trying to think of, I've got other favorite songwriters. Why can't I think of any of them at the moment? I mean, Elliott Smith
I
is
was
like a
gonna
great
say Elliott
example.
Smith.
Who,
Yeah, that was on the
yeah,
tip of my tongue.
um, uh, Still, who I've been obsessed with recently, who I became really obsessed with a couple years ago. But I rewatched that documentary, Lost Angel, and really just been wearing those records out the last
Did
few
you ever
weeks.
get to see
Um,
him?
Randy Newman,
Have you seen him live?
I've seen him live, yeah, twice,
Okay, cool.
and it was awesome. The first time I was in the front row at the show, and he did "Love Story" as an encore, and I said, "Oh fuck yeah!" And he turned to me and he said, "This one's for you, then,"
Oh
which
man,
was really
what a
cool.
moment! What a moment!
Um, yeah, so that's a so, but I think about Randy Newman, who is like the complete opposite end of the spectrum from any of these like literalist, like too dumb not to be sincere songwriters
Hmm.
who are kind of these like power pop guys. And I just think it's like, like I don't know if you saw this. There's like this I think it's like Don Henley or something is
Yeah.
talking he's talking about, you know what I'm talking about? He's talking about Randy Newman at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he says that
Okay.
like he's talking to Randy Newman, and he's like, "Yeah, man, like Short People, such a good song about like prejudice in America." And Randy Newman was like, "Nah, I just thought a song about short people was funny."
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just think that that's like perfect, like just chef's kiss. Um, and so I always like those are like sort of my heroes as songwriters, or people like Randy Newman or Harry Nielsen, or these people who are definitely ironists, um, as well as like, great melodicists or
Hmm.
whatever. And then I think that, like, like I kind of have like there's a lot, you know, I don't want to go on too big a tangent, but there's a lot of music right now that is power pop. It's having a moment again.
Hmm.
And there was like a Bandcamp article recently that was like power pop is the voice, is the sound of now
Yeah, I
or
read it.
something. And I think and I think it's a lot of uh bands who are not doing anything to elevate the genre at all or make it interesting at all. I think it's just, I don't want to say all of the bands on that list, but I would say that the vast majority of those bands are just kind of like um, complicit in keeping that genre as uh, boring and as prescriptivist
Mm,
as possible, and that's just not interesting to me. And honestly, it makes me feel really kind of like alienated from, it makes me
mhm.
not want to be associated with power pop. It makes me not want to play a Rickenbacker. It makes me
Right.
not want to like be pegged as that at all.
Yeah.
So but again, I don't want to go on this like crazy tangent of talking
No, I
shit.
mean, I
I don't
I
really
can
have too
totally
much shit
relate.
to talk. Uh,
No, I mean, I think that that's okay, first and foremost. Like,
sure,
and B, I agree with pretty much everything you're saying because I have felt this way myself. Like I sort of had stumbled into power pop, in this kind of like backwards way where I was making this kind of like zany, like super hyper post-punk like music that sounded like Talking Heads getting like electrocuted or something. Like that's what
sure,
Thunderbirds Are Now was. And even though that wasn't like my first inclination as a songwriter to write music like that, that's just kind of what happened. And I was getting into like Gang of Four and Wire and Liquid Liquid and ESG and these like kind of punky dance bands from the late 70s early 80s at the time, and sort of like trying to figure out how to make music like that because it was something that didn't come naturally to me. And so it was
sure,
such a like unintentional challenge that I had created for myself that it ended up giving me the ability to like do some cool things with music, right? But like
sure,
when that was coming to an end and I was sort of like, okay, now what am I gonna do? My inclination was to kind of like go back to my like initial like songwriting influences, which was the Beatles and the Kinks, but then also Weezer
sure,
and like Sloan and whatever, Matthew Sweet or whatever, it doesn't matter. But like I
sure,
just sort of was like, I don't even, whatever, this is just like 90s rock, I don't know. And even though I've known the term power pop or whatever, I wasn't like, I'm going to make power pop music now. Like it was just like,
sure.
I'm gonna write some
God forbid.
songs. You know what I
Yeah, no,
mean?
exactly. Yeah,
And then all of a sudden, like I was like, when I started putting out solo records myself and sending things out and trying to figure out, who writes about shit that like sounds like what I'm doing, and like I met Nick kind of around the same time, who kind of like was already kind of in that world a little bit and like had recommended, a few places to send like CDs or whatever. Like all of a sudden I found myself like, oh, I guess this is what I do, I guess. I don't know. I
sure,
wasn't like intentionally making that kind of music, but regardless, like throughout that whole experience, like I've also made completely different music. I am currently like playing in sort of like a hardcore band as a 46-year-old man with some of my friends, just playing like loud, fast punk music. I'm playing drums in a
sure,
band that somebody else is the songwriter in, and just like getting a chance to like, contribute songwriting wise from that position, which is different than like leading a band and singing songs. Um,
sure,
uh, and so and also like remaining like very open-minded to other styles of music, and
sure,
listening to like stuff on like International Anthem, like that jazz label that like puts out weird cool new jazz shit, or like like I said, like getting into like Fela Kuti or something, which seems kind of cliche in a way, but like also like that shit rules, and like it can lead you down such a cool path of finding out about all these other like Nigerian bands that made this like super insane music in the 1970s, right? So like
Sure.
even though I probably could never write music like that authentically, like being open-minded to like letting those influences come in, I feel like is inevitably going to make your songwriting choices and arrangement choices, but also what you kind of how you see yourself, I guess, as like an artist or whatever. Um, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling here a little bit, but like my point
No,
is
you're
that
fine.
um I don't know if, and I don't want to speak for other artists, and this isn't fair to do, but like I don't know if other like traditional power pop artists are as open to more music than what fits inside that power pop box for them. I could be totally wrong, but a lot of it is so vanilla sounding, you know, and
Yeah.
it kind of lacks like substance, especially lyrically, I find a lot, which I feel like is something
Yes,
that you really work hard on.
I
Um,
do. I really
so you know,
value. Yeah.
that's where some of my beef comes in. Is like lyrically, it's so like I can hear the song melodically and appreciate it, but when you like
Yeah.
peel back the layers of what they're saying, it's like this is nothing. And like especially right now with like
Yeah.
how fucked up the world is, like how can you not be singing about it what's happening in some way shape or form, for example, or like
Sure.
just how fucked up it is to be alive, you know, like
Yeah.
whatever.
Totally.
And you can do that and you could put it in like the context of power pop, but I don't know if a lot of bands do that, you know. So anyways, I'm gonna get off my soapbox about it. That's
No,
we
you're
I
fine.
mean, I know that
Um.
this is something you're passionate about because you wrote that article, that Power Pop is camp thing with the Talk
Yeah.
House, and I don't know if you want to talk about that at all.
We
Um,
can. I don't know how much I'd have to. I'm actually doing another article for Talk House that I have to
oh, cool.
finish. I'm so late on it, but um, it's not going to be related to that. Thank God. That
Has anything
article.
changed for you from like that the writing? I mean, it feels like maybe no is the answer based on what we're talking about here. But like, have
Um,
you had any sort of like revelations after that article was released that maybe like when you wrote it that you sort of like pivoted your point of view on it all? I mean, the answer could be no, but I'm curious.
um, I think that the article could have been better. But I
I thought
don't.
it was great.
Thanks. I don't know.
I
My
bought the
thesis hasn't
shirt.
really.
I bought the shirt.
That's
Okay.
cool.
Like, so
My
I should have
thesis
worn it.
hasn't changed. I learned about what is it, Mark Fisher's. I don't know if he coined the phrase, but the concept of hauntology, which is like it means something very specific in like a musical context. Like I feel like people usually associate it with like Ariel Pink and stuff,
Mm.
but
Mhm.
it's music that mourns a lost future. So when I read about that, I was like, oh, I wonder if you could like apply some of these arguments to Big Star or something.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that I could have done something a little broader, or maybe explained the phenomenon in a way that didn't explicitly relate it to camp. But I also think that it was so. You have an article like that that's kind of like faux academic, that elicits like a really volcanic response. Like there were a lot of old
It
heads
does.
that were really pissed about
Yeah.
it, and there were a lot of people on message boards that were kind of upset about it. And like I was kind of like, well, this in itself is like a performance of camp, kind of
Yeah.
like the
Totally.
fact that we now have a bunch of old guys who wear like paisley fedoras and stuff, like arguing about the merits of power pop or whether or not power pop is camp.
Yeah.
Like that to me is like an extension of the argument.
Right. The power
And
pop is camp inception moment.
Yeah, like people were asking like, hey, can you describe like what's going on with your like Cartesian frame here, like the like what's going on at the y-axis and what's going on at the x-axis. And I
Yeah.
was like, fuck off, like no, like
Yeah.
this is just like a joke.
Yeah.
So no, I think like my I don't even know. Yeah, I think that I don't even really remember what my thesis was, but I think that it was basically just that like there are people who play that style of music and they don't know they're being ridiculous.
Yeah,
And
there's a
sometimes
performative
that
aspect to it that kind of sort of takes away the like authenticity of it or something. But yeah, it's like
yeah,
the cheap trick thing on like turn all the way up, you know.
yeah, totally. Yeah, I guess they were their whole thing was like they had Rick Nielsen and Bunny Carlos, I think, of the
Yeah,
drummer.
they're
Were
like
like we're gonna have the
characters,
ugly guys and then the really pretty guys.
right?
Um, but so that whole thing is pretty campy.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I just think that there are bands like the Raspberries that are pure camp
Yeah.
because they don't have any self-awareness. They don't know what they're doing is stupid, and there's something really endearing about that. And
Hmm.
then there's a band like Sloan, for instance, who are hyper self-aware,
Hmm.
and that's like they're doing what I'm pretty sure is referred to as camping, where they're like actually sort of playing it all up. And like I guess I'm specifically thinking about like Twice Removed, like Pen Pals or something. Like a lot of that stuff to me feels like they're really they know what they're doing. It's not like
Hmm.
they're not like dumb like the Raspberries. They're
Yeah,
smart. Um,
Chris Murphy especially is like
yes,
very self-aware guy and like a music historian and an appreciator of like, you know, like the I think like he loves the lore of a band. You know what I mean? Like that's always
sure,
kind of been
yeah,
his thing. And so he's very plugged into that idea of like their legacy and how they're going to like look long after they're gone and the like annals of rock time, you know. And I'm not saying
sure,
that as like
totally.
a positive or negative thing. Like I know those guys kind of a little bit, so like I've been a
Okay,
fan since I was like a teenager. You
that's
know,
awesome.
I was like uh into them from basically Twice Removed to now and like have become, you know, friendly with some of the guys, but like I am
Sure,
very familiar with that. And I do think that like it's the argument is like is either side of that same coin better or worse than the other, right? Like is
sure,
it better to be dumb and have the like purity of it shine through because you're so oblivious to its ridiculousness that that's the charming thing
sure,
about it and that's what pulls you into it, especially it maybe even through the lens of nostalgia a little bit for some people or like a
right,
nostalgia for something that they didn't experience, you know, is maybe the more accurate thing. But then you've got the other side of the coin which is like the self-aware like, hey, like I got a leather jacket on in this music video and I'm wearing sunglasses.
right,
I'm also a really fucking
sure,
good songwriter, but like I know that like this comes off better if I look cool, you know?
sure, right.
And again, Chris, if you ever hear this, I'm not talking any shit. I think you would agree. Um, but yeah, I do think that yeah, that's just an interesting kind of like lens to look at it all through, you know?
Sure, yeah, thanks.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
and I think you know, I think it's just sort of again, it bleeds into the things that we've been talking about, like these kind of like this suite of records, you know, that sort of plays into that subversiveness and stuff. And I know that like Svengali to me, you know, and we can talk as much about this as you're comfortable with, but just like there was a build up to it, you know, there was excitement around it because MTV was like sort of this um unexpected kind of like hit, you know, like in an indie kind of
sure,
like, you know, music nerd kind of way, right? Like people who read
sure,
stereo gum and shit. Um, and so like, you know, some of the early singles even, I feel like before Svengali came out, like it was like, okay, this is in the same vein, but there's like something slightly different about this or whatever. Um, and then all this shit kind of goes down for you personally.
sure,
Um, and I guess I wonder, you know, being on the other side of that situation now, you know, where, not again to get into it, but there was an accusation kind of made against you, and you know,
Sure.
it eventually was sort of redacted and not necessarily an accurate accusation, and it sort of ended up in, and this is one of maybe many things, but and maybe not even the most important thing potentially, but like it ended up where that record didn't come out the way it was supposed to. It didn't come
Sure.
out on Lamo. Um, and you know, it was kind of out and then and gone and then, you know, revamped. And there's a whole thing with that too that I do want to ask you about, because we will have to
Sure.
get back, we will have to get back to music. But I
Sure.
am,
Yes. Yeah.
pun intended. But um without going into like the details of what happened, I'm more curious about um like how were you able to, and this is maybe, I don't want this to come off as like a trivial question at all, because there's so much like personal shit that I'm sure you had to wade through to kind of like get to a point that I want to kind of bring us to. But like
Sure.
how were you able to sort of like find the creative spark to like, because you've got, you know, a new record out now, you know, that's, and there's some other things that you did, you know, afterwards too, but like how were you able to get to that point where you're like, all right, like I think I can do music, I can kind of put myself back out there again, and like I don't like have to let this experience define me and be this like thing that like holds me back from doing what I'm, you know, I would think that you think you're here to do this, right? Like
Sure.
you're a
Yeah.
fucking guy who writes songs, you know? So how did you
Yeah.
get to that
Totally.
point to get back there? And was it difficult?
Um,
Was it a difficult kind of road down on your way?
yes, I would say that it was difficult. It's weird because in some ways I actually think I jumped back into it a little too soon because just out of habit. I mean, for, from when I was 24 or 23 until I was 31 or 32, I was touring consistently. I had
Hmm.
sort of always a release I was working towards finishing, and
Yeah.
there was always going to be some accompanying, like, there my life was kind of like structured in this way, and that structure was like completely interrupted, and the only thing I really knew how to do was um like I think in some ways it would have been healthier for me to take a break, and I
Hmm.
think what I did instead was like immerse myself further in it and sort of like just pick it right up and be like, I just need to keep writing, and maybe some of it will go away if I keep writing, or I can sort
Yeah.
of like some stuff will return to this state of normalcy or whatever. And I think that I did get some like interesting material out of that, but I also uh, think that that was like a weird decision that was sort of born of denial, sort of about the situation. And it's tough because it's like it's also like, as I'm sure you know, it's like therapeutic to write. It's like a
Yeah.
coping mechanism.
Of
And
course.
so it's
Yeah.
like, but I was kind of just like, at that point, that was all. I mean, I am gonna talk some shit, actually. If you'll indulge me,
I
and I
would
guess you
love,
could,
I
yeah.
would love to.
So I really, like I said at the beginning of the interview, I really do not like punching down. So this will only be punching up, but I was sort of like positioned by Lamo in particular to abandon everything in favor of music. And they were really sort of all in after MTV. I was doing some work in advertising at the time. I was going to school. I had my eggs in multiple baskets.
Hmm.
And Eric from Lamo was really like, no, it's like now or never. You got to be all in on music or this is not going to happen. And so there was like a lot of pressure to make Svengali as good of a record as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I really tried to do that, and I not in like a uh, I don't think those songs are forced by any means. I think that that material is really inspired. But
Yeah,
I
I do too.
basically what happened is that like when all of that fell to shit, I was sort of like just totally forsaken. Like I was like, okay, well, all of the things that I had in play before you told me to like abandon everything, uh, except for music, like all of that stuff didn't exist anymore, and all I had
Yeah,
was
yeah.
kind of just like, you know, the the pieces of my life as like a touring and performing and recording musician. So it was like I didn't have anything to go back to. All I really
Mhm.
knew how to do was like do music because like my mind is reacclimated or acclimated rather to this new reality. And so like now it's like, I'm making music still obviously, but I think that I'm also like doing other things. Um, and I just think it's like it felt like sort of a weird trick, I think, to have somebody tell me to like abandon everything, um, except like really invest everything into, like I think about like the UK tour and stuff that we went on and spent like an arm and a leg on, and just all
Mhm.
this sort of emotional and financial investment in this thing that ended up being like a punt. Um, it's just like that's like not that's just like really fucked up, I guess,
Yeah.
is how I
I
feel.
mean,
And
you might not talk to many people in this like kind of setting. Maybe you do, I don't know, but like I haven't had the same exact experience you have with that kind of being sort of like this thing that was sort of sold to you that like this is your shot at doing this, and you kind of going like,
sure,
all right, I'm gonna eat ramen noodles for 2 years,
sure,
and you
the
sort of just
payday and
accept,
a pickle.
yeah, you accept that
Yeah,
part of it, and you're like, I'll do that if it means, getting to travel and see some places that maybe I'll never see otherwise, or, you know,
sure,
I don't know, play with a band that I like, like go to South by Southwest, like whatever. So like, I understand and can empathize with that experience of feeling like you were kind of like some, there's parts of this experience that are in your control, and there's parts of this experience that are not in your control, and
sure,
I feel like that's a big part of what you experience through this kind of situation, and
sure,
what you can control was your creativity, and using that as like a therapeutic like instrument, if you will, to kind of like deal with this thing that is otherwise out of your control to an extent,
sure.
and so how did you get from like, because when this new record started bubbling up a little bit, I was like, oh, cool. He's like back to it. And I know that there was like, you know, like multiple versions of Svengali that have kind of like been released. And
Yeah,
I think
right.
I even messaged you about it once. I don't think you wrote me back, but like it was basically like,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. There was a lot going on for you at the time, but like I was like trying to figure out like which songs were kind of like from which, because there was like multiple fidelities, I feel like, to certain things, and like it
Yes,
seemed
yeah,
like it was sort of like picking the best kind of feel for whatever the song ended up being, because there's like versions of those songs, whether they're demos or just like an alternate take or whatever, I feel like that are like some are slower, some are faster, some are like, noisier, some are, more kind of considered, and like I just want you to know first and foremost that I really appreciate you putting all of that out there, because like it's so interesting to me as a songwriter to hear a songwriter's process kind of like be like out in the open like that. I think that's really
sure,
fucking cool. And I assume that that was like maybe part of it for you. But I assume there's also some like legal like stuff that kind of impacted the versioning of that record? Like, is that accurate? And like, what was that whole experience like, sort of figuring out and wading through how to get like at least some representation of that record out there in any way that you could?
Yeah. So I would say that largely the resequencing and the different versions and the different releases of that record has mostly to do with me just feeling totally insane in the moment. And I
Okay.
think being totally left to my own devices. And, like when you're doing a record for a label, at a certain point, it's like locked in and you
Hmm.
can't really go back and fiddle
Right.
with it
You're on a
anymore.
schedule.
Yeah. And so I think that there was a lot going on. There was some ambiguity as to what was happening with the record, um, with the original masters.
Mhm.
There was um, some some of it was me wanting to do a version of the record that felt like removed from this previous version of the record that had become kind of like traumatized for me,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. So
Yeah, it makes
there were just a
sense.
lot of,
Totally.
and then it makes sense in some ways, but in other ways, it's kind of all irrational and feels kind of just like it was a part of the chaos of the moment. And then sort of the version of the record that I finally released was the original sequence in addition to everything I had just produced as like a outtake or just everything. It was like I was like, you know what, like the first version was actually the best. That's going to be the version that I put out. And then I'm just going to include all this bonus stuff because anybody
Yeah.
who's interested in the record just deserves it. Um, and that was kind of my logic after I had like settled down. And,
Mhm.
but, but no, I mean, there wasn't a lot of, um, I wasn't, I wasn't clear on what was going to happen with the record. Like even when Lamo was like, we're not going to put it out, I was like, that wasn't really there was this open to this that felt kind of awkward, and I was like, well, maybe the path of least resistance is just to do this other version of the record. But I will not say that like there was legal, like,
Okay.
it's not like had I put out those masters I would have gotten like my ass sued off or anything.
Okay. Okay.
It was just like a crazy chaotic moment where nobody knew what was going to happen with
Yeah.
anything, and there were
Yeah.
all these plans that had been made. These plans were ruined, and it was like total chaos. And reflecting on that, like I do think that the original 13 track sequence that record was the best, but I'm also happy that there's a version of it that exists that's very maximalist and insane.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
I
I
you know
I have to I just, again, like uh commend you for I think even more so now, knowing that it wasn't something that like you were sort of forced into doing by any means, that you were just
no
like
yeah
capturing almost like the frantic nature of that whole kind of time in your life, and just like saying it again. It's like these like moments of fuck it, these moments of just like, I do not give a shit what anybody thinks. I'm gonna do this. Um,
sure
for whatever myriad of reasons I'm doing it, even if there isn't a reason, I'm just doing it. I think is like, that's something that draws me to you as an artist, and something that I really appreciate about what you do. Because
thanks
I do think it makes for a deeper connection to the music when you know that there's this kind of like spirit behind it that I myself have also felt like, where I've been in situations where like I've been in a frantic like flurry of songwriting because there is something external, like trying to break into my bubble and that's my like defense mechanism to it. You know what I mean? So
Sure. Yeah.
so anyway, yeah, I mean, I can relate. Well, cool. I know we've been kind of talking for a while, and I'm very much enjoying it. I do want to talk about the new record.
Sure.
I've uh I've been listening to it a lot. Honestly, I think like first of all, it's called Today I Played My Guitar and Sang, and it came out in July. Um, and I feel like it's kind of the record that like encapsulates pretty much everything we've been talking about. It distills it into this, this kind of one record, kind of in a way like that if I was to play somebody a record from your catalog that I felt like, you know, does a really great job of like showing all of the sides of your songwriting and your personality and your lyricism, I would play them this record. This would be my
Nice.
like I always tell people like if what's the one Guided by Voices record you would hand somebody, it's always Isolation Drills, because I feel
Yeah,
like
sure.
you can go in either direction, like forward or backward from there, and like get what they are no matter where, no matter what. And I feel like no matter what you do after this, like I feel like this is that record where you can point to and say like this is kind of like to me again, like this is a really great representation of this dude's like songwriting brain, like in full active mode. um
Sure.
anyway,
Thanks.
I don't know how that like much that resonates with you, but um how do you kind of see it kind of fitting in to the sort of narrative that we've been kind of like discussing this whole time?
Sure. Well, it's very, I mean, it's, um, um, I had to be sort of like convinced to make this record by a
Hmm.
few different people, but most notably, I guess, John Titterington, who produced a lot of it, who sort of
Okay.
like convinced me to make a record in a different way. Like he was like, you probably shouldn't make the next one by yourself. Let's try
Hmm.
making one in LA. Let's use like some people, and we used some of the members of the Father John Misty band and
Yeah,
did
cool.
it in a very different way. And I think what happened is that it ended up weirdly becoming the most collaborative record I've done.
Awesome.
Um, so so I think about it as a record with a lot of ideas that are not mine, which is cool because that
Cool.
is something that's pretty distinct. In like I think it kind of there are times where it sounds like natural beauty, but
Hmm.
there I think the thing that I dislike about natural beauty is that it makes me feel sort of like sick of myself because it's just
Hmm.
so ornate, and all those ornate decisions were made by one person.
Right.
It wasn't like this kind of record where it was like all of the arrangement decisions were sort of made by either John or the person playing that instrument in
Yeah.
that part
Yeah.
on that recording. And
Yeah.
so I think that like it's exciting to me in that way because I'm not just hearing myself. Um,
Right.
and
And when you're listening back, especially maybe with like other people, you can sort of like articulate like, oh, like check out this part that so and so played, whatever, it's a bass line or
Exactly. I'm not
like
going
a
to be like,
keyboard line.
check out this bass line of mine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, like
Yeah.
like you can listen
Totally.
to it as a fan of what that person
Yeah.
is doing
Sure.
and sort of separate yourself from, the totality of it in a way. You know what I mean? So no, I
No,
very much
totally.
understand that, like very much. So yeah. No, continue on. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, I guess it's hard for me to know like where it fits. I don't have a really good sense of that.
Right.
I think I'm proud of the record, and uh yeah, I wouldn't have released it had I not been proud of it. And I think that there are some songs on it that I'm quite pleased with.
There's some all-timers on there. Okay.
Thanks.
There's a couple all-timers in the vast Mo catalog. There's no wet t-shirt
Thanks.
contest.
There's no wet t-shirt contest.
But you know, there can
Uh,
only be one. There can only be
that's
one.
true.
Um, no, I think it's a really fantastic record. You know, I think that there's
Thanks.
a continuity to it. You know, I think it in that I think does come through with what you're saying in terms of like having a few other people playing on it and sort of like it sounding, you know, alive in that way and kind of like a band in that way. You know, while
Sure.
it still is like, you know, streamlined to an extent, there is still like a lot of like interesting things happening in the background. And I think that there's a lot of like dynamic to it. You know, there's um, you know, a few like more piano led ballads and some like jaunty, you know, kind of like brill building kind of like, you know, obla-di obla-da, almost kind of like
Exactly.
shit
Yeah.
going on, you know, but then you've got
Yes.
like a best seat in the house, which is like, you know, beeline right to your fucking like the middle of your head, like pop jam, you know, and so that again, like I feel like that those are the reasons why like if I was trying to like turn somebody onto you who didn't have a whole lot of time to like dig into everything, I would play them this just because I feel like, especially too, there's still like subversiveness throughout. You know, there's humor to the lyrics. There's like some songs still that like capture that like, you know, scuzz emo like period where, you know, you're everything's fucked up sounding, but still cool, you know, like um there's some funny, weird songs on those records, you know what I mean? So it still
Sure.
brings it's like grabbing from that too in that way that I think maybe Natural Beauty for you, not to put words in your mouth, but like, you know, you I guess you kind of said it yourself, like there's um, you know, essentially like a preciousness about it that like
Sure.
a seriousness about it that you I think have like found that sweet spot between like being able to create something that's musically ornate and very serious in terms of its like arrangement, whether that's on your own or with other people in terms of this record maybe, but like also you can like, you know, write songs that have, you know, just like some really fucking hilarious, cool lyrics. Like again, there's that song about the convention that's really funny,
Yeah.
but like
Thanks. Yeah.
also like a really well written song, you know. So
Thank you.
maybe it's the Randy Newman. It's just a song about short people in you coming through. But
Yeah.
I just yeah, I love it, and I think you have it's something to be proud of, and I'm glad that you made it for sure.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I do want to talk to you quickly because, you know, I'm always curious, like, um, you know, like how creative people make a living. You know, it seems like you've found, you know, kind of a spot for yourself in terms of like production and recording.
Sure.
My of sort of I guess he's not like a friend, but like another musician from here, Danny Van Zant. I know you
Oh
worked with
yeah,
him.
yeah. He's
Um,
great.
yeah, and I played some shows with him. He's really cool. Good guy. But like I mentioned at the top, Slippers and Bory and Diners, those records, I think are the ones that like people would probably like associate you with being involved with, from a production and like engineering perspective. But like, I'm curious, you know, what about production and like helping other bands like capture a vibe and a sound? Like, what does that do for you as like a musician and as an artist, as a songwriter? Like, talk to me about the relationship that I feel like has to exist between Mo, like like the songwriter artist, and then Mo as the production engineer person, like, and where that like Venn diagram kind of like mashes together.
Sure. Well, I think that I think that it's interesting because I think over the past couple of years, I've sort of gravitated more towards like the Steve Albini school of thought, where it's like,
Mhm.
you know what, this band's good, the songs are good, just like set up some mics
Yeah.
and
Press play, press
everything will
record.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've gotten more like that. I think that but I think that so I do generally feel like the first draft best draft as it relates to pop music in particular. And I think a lot of people have really good ideas and then tend to second guess themselves. And I
Yeah.
think that one thing that I provide as a producer is I'm the person who's like, no, 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 you were right the first time, and you were like really right. And
Yeah.
like the further you go, sort of like modifying this or second guessing yourself, the further we get from like solid gold, basically. Because I do think that, I just think that people have really good ideas and don't have like I'm a really big as a producer, I don't see myself as like somebody who's like it's weird. Like some people will talk about my production work sometimes in this way where they're like, he definitely like left his mark on it or whatever. And to me, that's
Mhm.
not really like audible unless somebody's referring to like a specific guitar part I played or something. But
Yeah.
that's not. I think of myself more as like the artist's cheerleader, where it's like this person, a lot of creative people and a lot of songwriters, they don't feel comfortable showing their stuff when it's in a really rough shape to like other people, or they
Mhm.
kind of like are just siloed off from everything. And like I really have tried to like um be the person that people are like comfortable showing rough drafts to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I think that there's so much in like a rough draft. And I think my feedback is usually like, keep it exactly like this, but let's put like real drums on it or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
I think that I try to preserve that
Well, it's good to have
like
like a
spirit or
foil,
like fire.
it's good to have that
Sure.
person that kind of like you can bounce ideas. I have like Nick Punty is one of those people for me that like I will send, rough demo to, or even just like a quick voice memo or whatever of an idea to, and just like, this is good. Is this good? Like
Sure.
not even like that. If he said no, if he said it wasn't good, I would still probably be like, fuck you, man. I'm just I'm
Sure.
gonna
Sure.
finish this
Totally.
anyway. But like I do
Yeah.
think it's good to like have those people, and I think it's like an important part to sort of being involved with other people's art. To be sort of like um to create that space that is a safe one for people to just kind of like, I don't know if this is a thing, but I'm going to show you anyways. And it might be like
Yeah.
the best
Sure.
thing they've ever done. They just need somebody to kind of go like, yeah, this is, I hear what this is. And, like you said, let's just put, you know, this whatever fill in the blank thing on it. And then it sort of comes alive. Right. So, um,
Sure.
and I do think like I really that Slippers record especially like I really enjoy that record. I love that the first song is like what like it's like a half a
40
minute or something
seconds.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like a
Yes.
total jam, like you're like, oh shit, this is good, and then it just ends and you're like, oh, okay, cool, and then the next song is great too. But um I don't know, do you feel like you would have landed in that zone of like um first idea, best idea, like show me your rough draft? Do you think you would have like landed there if you didn't make uh, a record like MTV, for example, which like probably unexpectedly to a degree maybe like landed with people. I don't know, but like um do you think you would have landed there as a producer if you didn't make those records? Or do you think that there's like a through line to those experiences?
Well, I guess one thing is like, so I think that I have a specific talent where I know really quickly if something I write is total dog shit or good. And I had a friend that also had this talent when I was a kid, and he used to describe it. The way he described it is like he would write a song and he'd be like, he'd feel so good about it, and he'd be like, I'm going to hell because I think I'm God. It was like how he would describe the feeling of like
Right.
writing something. And I think that I don't think that that's like a talent that I have exclusively, or even a talent necessarily. But I think that I know when I write something that's good. And I think that I know when I write something that's absolutely terrible. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, back to the drawing board. But I think a lot of people don't know that. And so what happens is that they amass a collection of songs that are all incredible. They're like, I honestly don't know what to make of this. And
Mhm.
it's probably because they've thought too much about it. And I think that I really like do kind of feel like school A&R, like man with the golden ear type person for
Right.
some people, where
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm able to identify like what is great. Um, I'm never like, but this is dog shit. I'm only ever that critical with myself. It's usually like these songs are better than these songs, but it's, yeah. I think that there are just a lot of people that make really great stuff and are unsure, you know,
Mhm.
and need
Well,
somebody to
you
tell
know,
them that their songs are great.
it is an important part of the process, and to do it in such an isolated way can certainly work out for some people, but I tend to, even like when I'm just like doing something on my own, I still need some people to like, you know, run some things through just to kind of like
Sure,
get it out of my own head. It's just like, I don't
sure,
know.
no, for sure.
Like I could write this 12 different ways, but this is the
Yeah,
way I wrote it. And, you know, this is, I just need it to be heard by at least one other person to just commit, sometimes. So,
sure,
anyway,
totally.
well, speaking of commitments, I guess like one thing that like I do ask people about on this podcast is, the idea of like having to promote things, is um, different to different people. And um, I'm kind of curious what your take is on it because I feel like you're probably like you don't give a shit about as much of a shit about like you're not like, pumping out content on Instagram
Yeah,
every other day, like but
sure,
like also like it is part of it, right? To an extent. Like you do want other people to hear it. And this dumb element that we have to sort of like accept as a necessary evil, I guess, exists so people can hear the thing we worked hard on, right? So I'm curious like
sure.
what your take is on all that and how you kind of handle that side of things.
Well, I hate it, and I don't like to use any social media. Um, I don't like um, I don't like promoting things at all. I mean, I wish it was like old school music industry where there was like a whole other arm of, like you could just sort of, even if you have a publicist now, it's like the expectation is that you're gonna like also be boosting your shit.
Oh
So,
yeah. Yeah.
um, so I just like don't. Yeah, I think that your assessment's accurate. I don't really care, and I think that it's all like disgusting. And every time I go on Instagram, I get pretty bummed out. And I've since I've used social media less, I felt a lot healthier. And I don't
Yeah.
think that I think that like I could be going harder with promoting stuff, but I think I just like at this point, it's like there are people who are going to care about. Like, I get more, for instance, like the album I just put out, like most of the people who bought that on Bandcamp, it's because they got a notice directly from Bandcamp that it had come out.
Mhm.
So I don't even feel like anymore, I don't even feel like it's like a necessity for me anymore. I think that there are people who are interested and they'll sort of just know because they're keeping tabs.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I have to like be like converting anyone
Mhm.
at this point in my life. Um, so Yeah, I hate that we have to do it, and that that expectation is placed on artists. And yeah, I guess it's pretty much it.
No, I can I can relate to, especially like at my age. Like it just
Yeah,
I feel so less and less connected to it as I get older, you know. I don't go out unless I play a show, you know, like I don't drink, you know, like I don't
sure, me
it, you
neither.
know,
Yeah,
I have a teenager, you know, like that I gotta
yeah,
like take to basketball practice, you know, like I have you know, and like you said, like you go on it and it's like there's a lot to be bummed out about right now. Not to make light of it.
sure.
It's also fucking absurd. But you know, I have like been really trying to stay off it a little bit more lately because
Yeah.
I can get really bummed out uh, and sucked into it, you know, and especially having like a
Oh, are you
teenager.
still there?
Oh, did I drop for you? Am I here? Hello.
I can't hear you.
Well, we'll be right back. Hey, can you
Sorry
hear
about
me?
that. Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
it's okay,
Go
man.
ahead.
It's okay. It's all good. Back to kind of what we were saying though. I guess, yeah, just the world right now obviously is uh insane and you know, for me it's like having a teenager, you know, like everything just feels like so much more anxiety ridden, you know, just like
Sure,
wanting the world to be good for him as he grows up. And
sure. I can't imagine. Yeah,
you know, and I'm a very anxious person as it is, and uh recently got on some medication to help with that. So I'm like, and it is working. So, you
yeah.
know,
When that
but
stuff
yeah, I
works,
mean,
it's great.
yes, it really is blowing my mind kind of that I
Yeah,
actually put it off as long as I have, to be quite
it can be
honest with
life
you.
changing. Yeah,
Yeah, so that's a positive, but yeah, back to the music side of the conversation, you know, I think that it's like a drag too. And I just would love to just like, you know, put stuff out, have people hear it in an organic way, maybe play a show or two and like, you know, keep at it, you know, like that's what's most important to me. It's just like to keep it going because that's, you know, um what else am I gonna do? I guess. Um anyway,
yeah, totally.
let's bring it home. Let's wrap it up. I do want to ask you, uh this podcast is again sort of
Uh,
about like talking uh about, you know, talking to artists that I guess are, you know, maybe a little under the radar. And I'm curious if there's anybody that you think is kind of like a hidden gem or like people that are an artist that people are kind of sleeping on that you think people should check out.
Hey,
Hey man, can you hear me?
sorry, I don't. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Well, um, what I was kind of asking you, is there other artists, other like musicians, creatives, like could be comedian, I don't care, like uh, graphic designer, like are there people like that you feel like are kind of under the radar that other people should be aware of that they should check out? Um, what do you recommend people put on their radar?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, there's this band called Alco Pops from Portland, whose last couple of records I've done, and they're really great.
Okay,
Um, and I believe they just started a new band called Car Talk, but I don't think they have any recordings out. But it's like the
okay,
same members.
okay,
Um, Portland band.
okay.
And what else? There's a band out of Seattle called Fine. That's like a kind of like a post punk band. Whose I recorded one of their EPs a few years ago, and they're really great.
Okay.
Um, and My friend Dylan from New York is in a band called Spirit Night, and he's a great songwriter. He, uh, and I'm sure many more, but I can't think too well right now.
No, no, it's good. We've been on for a long time, so I definitely want to kind of like wrap it up with you. We should do something together, maybe musically at some point
Sure,
too. You know,
whenever you
if
want.
yeah, cool. Well, we can talk offline about it,
Sure.
as they say in the biz. Uh, cool. Well, I want to thank you again for being on the show. You know, it's really a pleasure to talk to you. Um,
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
yeah, of course. Like not to like uh you know totally negate our conversation around promotion, but if people do want to like check you out at all, if they haven't, um motroper.net, which is kind of more like uh discography, like a production, like recording focus website in which I assume people can reach out to you if they want to work with you on anything. Is that
Yes, totally. Yeah,
and do you do like remote stuff? Like
I
will
do.
people have you like mix something they record at home and just send you like the raw file kind of shit and you can sort of like mix it from that perspective, or are you more like analog only? Like what is like
No,
just out of
no. I mean,
curiosity?
I'll do everything. Like I do a lot of remote sessions, and there are times
Okay.
where I'll do like instrumental tracks for people, and
Right.
we can do. I do a lot of different things.
Cool. So people
Full
can
service engineer, as they say.
hell yeah, man.
Yeah,
So people can go to motroper.net and kind of just like contact you from there, I assume, and set up, send you an email or whatever and get some questions answered around working with you in that way. But then if people want to hear you, a good place is Bandcamp. It's motroper.bandcamp.com/music. And then you do have Instagram that
I
I've seen
do.
you use a handful of times. And that's
Yeah,
just at Mo Troper. So yeah, do please go listen to Mo. His new record, like I said, that just came out in July is called Today I Play My Guitar and Sang, and it's super, super good. So I encourage you to listen to that. And yes, Mo, thank you again for being on this uh, very deep dive into the life of Mo
of
Troper
course. No, thanks
edition
for
of,
having me.
yeah, no problem. Good to talk to you. Have a good
You
night.
too. Yeah, you
Thanks,
too.
man.
Talk to you soon. Yeah, bye.
Bye.